You want to hear about Siberia, about minus 71 degrees Celsius, minus 96 degrees Fahrenheit, and about the foolish mistake that almost turned me into a permanent ice sculpture. Very well. This is the story of the night I decided to challenge Yakusha without a hot tent. It was a decision born from confidence, or perhaps arrogance. I had conquered many cold regions, and I thought I could handle the pull of cold with just a top-of-the-line four-season tent and a layered sleeping bag system. I arrived in a sparse taiga forest, the snow already up to my waist. The air was so cold, it felt thick. At minus 65 degrees Celsius, minus 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and dropping, my breath didn't just turn to fog. It instantly crystallized into tiny ice particles that tinkled as they fell onto my parka. The first job was basic survival, wood and water. Finding firewood here was an icy hell. The stunted larch trees were dry, but their trunks were as hard as steel. With every swing of the axe, I felt like I was striking concrete. The axe head bounced off, sending a brutal, stinging vibration through my thick gloves. It took me nearly 3 hours just to gather enough wood for one night. Sweat had begun to soak my base layer, a dangerous sign. I had to change it immediately before it froze. Next was water. I dug up snow so dry and powdery, it was like dust and packed it into my metal pot. It took an astonishing amount of fuel, firewood, just to melt enough water to drink. I cooked a simple meal, dried reindeer meat, stewed with fat, and some pasta. It was a high-calorie meal, but the warmth it provided was fleeting. When the sun, which was really just a faint smear of light, vanished below the horizon, the temperature plummeted. My thermometer read minus 71 degrees Celsius, minus 96 degrees Fahrenheit. I crawled into my tent. Outside the campfire I had just
Real
built
people
looked
do,
like
they
a
would
weak
never.
matchstick in the vast darkness. Inside the tent, the air was still agonizingly cold. My four-season tent was just a thin shell blocking the wind. It held no heat because there was no heat source inside it. I got into my sleeping bag system.
Gonna light the fire now.
First, things seemed fine, but about an hour later, I realized my mistake. The cold wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was radiating from inside me. My body could not generate enough heat to warm the empty space within the sleeping bag. I started to shiver. It was an uncontrollable, violent shaking. My teeth chattered. This was the first stage of hypothermia. I knew I had to do something, but a terrible, overwhelming fatigue washed over me. And this is the trap. The cold doesn't kill you with pain. It lulls you to sleep. I started to feel strangely warm. The shivering stopped. That was the red alert. When you stop shivering, it means your body has given up trying to stay warm. A voice in my head said, "Sleep. Just for a little while." I almost listened to it. If I had closed my eyes then, I would have never woken up.
Some ramen noodles.
I'm not really good.
With a final, desperate act of will, I screamed at myself. I fought my way out of the sleeping bag. My fingers were stiff as wood, almost useless. I couldn't even pull the zipper on the tent. In a panic, I used my knife to slash a line through the tent door. I fell out into the snow. The campfire was nearly dead. I spent the remaining 8 hours of that night in hell. I did not sit, I did not stand still. I paced around the fire, constantly feeding it wood, swinging my arms, jumping in place. I punched my own thighs to make sure I could still feel them. When the first weak streaks of dawn appeared, I was still alive, but my body was exhausted. The tips of my fingers and toes had first-degree frostbite. I learned my lesson in Siberia. At minus 71 degrees Celsius, a regular tent is just a body bag. A hot tent with a stove inside isn't a luxury. It is the only difference between waking up the next morning and becoming part of the permafrost.